All right, all right, all right. I think we're live. All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to today's workshop. I am absolutely ecstatic to have you guys here for today's live session on acquiring, keeping, and monetizing users. All very critical challenges for any app founder. If you're joining from our App Talks community, nice to see you all again. And if you are joining from LinkedIn and don't know me, my name is Nick Grayson. I'm the co-founder and head of growth at RoundSquared. We help apps reduce acquisition costs through a mix of creative strategies and performance marketing. Additionally, if you're not a part of our community yet, I created App Talks as a space for mobile app founders to connect and share insights through our community platform in monthly networking calls. Today's session is just another example of how we bring actionable high-value insights straight to you. So now let's talk about why we're here. We all know that getting users is one thing, but keeping them and monetizing effectively is another. That's why I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Ben Gohlke, developer advocate at Adapty. Also, a quick shout out to David Mall from Adapty as well for helping make this happen. So Ben's been in the game for around 20 years now with 14 plus years experience, specifically in iOS development. He's built apps, led high-performing teams, and mentored hundreds of developers. Now at Adapty, he helps teams optimize paywalls, pricing models, and user acquisition strategies, all through data-driven growth tactics. So in today's sessions, Ben's going to cover how to acquire and retain users effectively, optimizing paywalls and pricing models, leveraging A/B testing for revenue growth, the balance between paid versus organic user acquisition. So we're going to start with a 30-minute deep dive, followed by a 30-minute Q&A. If you have questions for Ben, feel free to put those in the comment section, and we'll get to those as we wrap up at the end. So with that said, Ben, I'm going to pass it on over to you.
Thanks so much, Nick. Appreciate it. All right. So like Nick said, we are here to talk about acquiring and keeping users. So let's just dive right in. And like he said already, he stole my introduction, but that's totally fine. So about me, who am I? I'm Ben Gohlke, and developer advocate at Adapty. Like he said, I've been in the iOS game for a long time, built lots of different apps. And now I help other people to build and grow applications using Adapty. Just to mention what Adapty does really quick as a quick aside. Who are we and why would you want to listen to somebody from this company? We provide a lot of different tools that allow you to both build and grow your application, not just technically, but also from a business side and from a growth perspective. So we offer a subscriptions SDK, which allows you to really easily integrate in-app purchases and subscriptions into your application, whether it be for iOS or Android, React Native, Flutter. Even if you're using Unity to build a game, we have an ability to integrate in-app purchases and subscriptions in there to make that really easy to provide a monetization strategy for you in your application. We also do in-depth analytics. We have a paywall builder that allows you to build and deploy paywalls with no code in seconds, rather than having to go through the whole update cycle that you normally would have to do, where you code it yourself and then put it through Apple or Google's approval process. We also do A/B testing for those paywalls, so you can understand, you can put up two different paywall designs and make a data-driven decision about which one is better. And then this is just some of the things that we do. We have all kinds of different tools that are available to you to help you build and grow your application from zero all the way up to millions of dollars per month or per quarter in MRR. So really, no matter where you are in your app journey, if you're just starting out as a very small team or you're an established application, we probably have tools to help you. So let's jump into subscriptions and ads and the different ways that you can monetize your application and which way would work best for you. I can't give you a specific answer for every specific case, because it is going to vary depending on what you're trying to achieve. But in general, if we kind of broaden it out and take a look at subscriptions versus an ad-based business and we compare them, I can tell you that the data tells us that subscriptions tend to work better in a variety of ways. And one of them is that the ARPU, or the average revenue per user, is higher on a subscription-based application compared to an ad-based business. So you're going to get more value from each individual user compared to if the application was ad-based. So that means that you can have a, comparatively speaking, smaller user base and still get good or even amazing financial performance out of the application compared to needing a lot more people in order to sustain an application with ads. In addition, you can also not have to worry about relying on either ad networks that provide perhaps low quality ads that maybe might sully or give your application a bit of a bad name or a bad taste in people's mouth because of the quality of the ads, Or if you decide to go your own route, you'd have to then deal with managing the ad inventory and making sure that it's up to date, that you've got enough people coming in with advertisement copy, and you have good click-through rates, and you have good purchasing numbers, all the kind of things to make sure that the ad network that you're building yourself and maintaining yourself is of high enough quality that you'll attract the kind of people that you need to display ads. So there's a lot of work and overhead required to either build and maintain that yourself, or to kind of police and make sure that the networks that you're working with are providing you with ads of a certain level of quality. In addition to those things, subscription revenue tends to be more stable and reliable compared to ad-based revenue. So as you can imagine, somebody signs up and either subscribed for a month or perhaps a year or some other period of time. That revenue then is guaranteed for that length of time. And there is a decent, usually depending on the length of the subscription, there is a decent renewal rate. So in general, broadly speaking, subscription-based applications have a more reliable revenue source than an ad-based one. And related to that, at scale, most of your revenue is going to come from renewals. So, and the advantage to that is that there's no CAC in that case. So CAC is consumer acquisition cost, which is basically the amount of money it costs you to acquire a single customer. Normally, when you're trying to attract brand new customers, you have to pay money usually to attract them. Certainly, you can do discovery-based stuff where you post on social, something like that, to acquire users for free. But at scale, you're likely going to have a pretty sophisticated ad budget in order to attract those users, and all that adds up to a certain amount of money to attract a single customer. But when they're renewing on a subscription-based business, there is no CAC, right? They're already a customer. The subscription is renewing automatically in most cases, and so they don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. It just renews, and you get another lump sum of money for that, whatever that period might be. And then lastly, the subscription-based business tends to give you a better aligned set of incentives, both for you and for the subscriber. So if you think about it, as a subscription-based business, you want to attract and then hopefully convert those users into paying customers. Then you want to keep them around through high quality content and or high quality features, depending on what your application does, so that they will come back, they will continue to use the application, they will be a loyal customer, and when it comes time to renew that application subscription, they will happily do so because they're a happy customer. So there is a virtuous cycle that can be created there of good quality content and or good quality features in your application, and continued updates and improvements to those features over time as the app maker. And then you have the happy customers who renew. So it can create a very nice sort of relationship automatically with you and your customers to do bigger and better things over time. So let's say we've decided that we want to launch a subscription-based business, a subscription-based application. What are the ways that you can do user acquisition, right? UA. You can typically, there's two kind of broad buckets. There's paid and there's organic. So let's take a look at kind of the two there, and what are the pros and what are the cons of doing each. On the paid side, you have as far as pros, you have a very large reach with targeting. So you can go to different ad networks and different platforms, things like Meta, Google, and you can launch campaigns that reach a very large collection of people. And then you can, even if you say, I want a certain group of people of a certain demographic or age or gender or whatever, even in those cases, those networks are so large that targeting still takes you to a huge audience of potential customers. So your reach can be extremely broad. You also can use data to zero in on your ideal users. So again, with that targeting and with the tools that have been built into those networks, you can use the tools they give you to really find out exactly who the ideal customers are likely to be for you. And then you can target them specifically. So again, broad reach and also very specific kind of laser-like targeting on the people that you think are most likely to be interested in your application. Those are going to be, certain definitely pros of the paid approach, because you're paying someone who has built a huge infrastructure to help you with that. And then you can also literally pay for installs and visibility. So there is a cycle of, putting out a certain amount of money and then garnering a certain amount of installs. And over time, you start to create you can understand basically what your CAC actually is to acquire a customer and get an install. And then depending on the network and depending on the application, you can sometimes you have the ability to essentially just pump more money into that system and get more installs. It's not foolproof, but it creates a cycle where you can essentially pay for installs and visibility. So those are the pros to that, and they are definitely pros of paid versus organic. You don't really get those things with organic reach. The downsides to paid are, of course, expense, right? If you're a new application, if you're an indie, if you're a small team, a startup, you may not have much of a paid advertising budget, if any at all. And so in that case, it may just be unavailable to you, or let's say you have a few dollars to spend, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to get what you need out of that with that very small budget. So in general, Adapty recommends, we don't really recommend that you start doing any significant serious paid UA until you're probably at least over $10,000 a month in revenue. Maybe even 25 or 50, just depending on what your app does and the places that you want to go to spend that paid that ad spend. So it depends a little bit, but in general, probably we're looking at least maybe $25,000 a month before you want to really consider it, because anything less than that, the money that you may have available to you is probably not going to be enough to make a difference, to make a real strong impact on your UA. So in that case, if you're trying to spend your money wisely, just kind of hold off on that and wait till you get to that level. So again, very expensive. Also, typically, paid-based users, users that you garner through paid UA, generally tend to have a higher churn rate. So if they've come in not because they found you or they sought you out, or they got maybe a personal testimonial from a friend or something, right? If the way that they became part of your orbit is through an ad, they're just generally speaking probably not quite as invested, right, in what you're doing, and also maybe the problems that you're solving for them, because they perhaps were brought in through an ad. So it's not always the case, but in general, it tends to be the case that typically you got higher churn on those users. And then lastly, saturation of your ad campaigns can lead to reduced effectiveness. So imagine you see ads everywhere for something. In some cases, that can induce you to be interested in such a thing. And next time you see it, on the store shelves, you might say, "Oh, I'm going to pick this up because I saw it a bunch and I want to try it." There's also the case where you see something a million times and you get kind of sick of it, and then it actually turns you away from the thing that they're trying to attract you to, right? So if you think about kind of how you experience ads in your own life, again, a possible downside of paid UA is that it depending on how you deploy it, it can end up being not as effective because of the saturation. So conversely, with organic, it's kind of basically all the opposites of what we just talked about. So you've got word of mouth, you got SEO and ASO, which is App Store optimization, and search engine optimization. So that's sort of web-based and App Store-based optimization of your keywords and the way that your application gets presented to customers. Those are all the ways that you can easily garner interest in your application, and it is obviously it's a much smaller group in general, but conversely, they tend to be a little bit more loyal, more likely to stick around, because they either sought you out through search or some other mechanism. They heard about you from a friend. They saw you, perhaps you did some kind of, partnership deal where you reached out to an influencer, and maybe money didn't change hands, but you still got some exposure, maybe even organically, where they just found your app and talked about it on their channel. They have a large presence. The people that follow that person and trust that person then are perhaps more likely to check you out. And again, that trust can kind of transfer over, at least to a degree, and you end up with people who typically tend to be a little bit more loyal, a little bit more likely to install, to use, and potentially even convert into a paying customer. And because of that, your base tends to be stronger, and they genuinely want to use your product. Of course, the downside is that base is smaller than it would be if it was paid, right? So it's kind of more people who are perhaps less attached versus fewer people who are likely to be more attached to what you're doing. The downsides, of course, are that it's a lot slower than paid. You can, depending on how you ramp up your paid UA, you can end up with a machine that essentially pumps out installations, right? Like you put money in and you get installations out. Again, they're maybe not the best quality, but if that's the metric that you're looking for, you can get those with organic. It's much more up and down, right? You may end up getting perhaps a mention by an influencer, and your application goes viral, and you get this sudden burst of installs, and then it wanes, and then you don't have many, right? So it's more up and down, and generally speaking, slower than with paid. And then targeting is much harder, in some cases impossible, but certainly harder in the sense that if you're going to do organic, and let's say you're going to build your own social presence for your application or your company, you can do that, and you can inject tactics into how you're doing that with your marketing to try and make things that are enticing and interesting and would cause the content you're creating to have some virality to it. Virality is kind of famously difficult to capture in a bottle, but you can certainly do things. There's tactics, ways that you can do that to encourage that to be likely. But it's just much harder than moving sliders and pushing buttons inside of an ad platform that is dialing you into exactly the people that you're looking for. And so as a result of kind of the pros and cons to organic, your problem solving for users needs to be obvious and high in order to get those people who kind of find their way to your application. You need to have a really strong, convincing case inside your app once you get them there that it's worth finishing the onboarding, starting to use it, maybe even converting into a paid customer. The use case and the problem solving for them needs to be really high in order for them to stick around. Next up, we've got installs. So let's say that we've done that UA, whether it's paid or it's organic, and we have a customer. They have gone to the App Store, the Google Play Store. They've downloaded the application. They've installed it. They've run it for the first time. And now you need to, like I said just a minute ago, you need to convince them that it's worth sticking around. So the installs are really just the top of the funnel. You've done all that hard work to get them there, but really you just started. You haven't really gotten that far with them, despite all the work that's been completed. You need to continue to work in order to keep them. So with this, onboarding is key, right? It needs to be highly valuable, it needs to be well presented, and it needs to be tailored ideally to their use case. So if you think about onboarding someone, or maybe when you've onboarded into apps yourself, for me, I don't want a lot of fluff, right? I want to get to the point. What is this? If you're going to take me through an onboarding process, why are you doing it, right? Why is it important for you to show me tailored, specific screens that aren't just the interface of the application? And so tell me something really valuable about the experience I'm about to have. Present it well, no typos, no grammatical mistakes, no weird animations. Make sure that stuff is very polished. And then ideally, depending on the app that you're building, you want it to be tailored. So that's something that's been happening more recently with applications, is you'll see things like surveys and other kinds of question and answer sessions that the app engages with the customer. And the goal is to understand more about their needs. So let's just say, for purposes of example, that we're building an app that tracks calories and workouts, right? To help the user maybe lose weight or get in better shape, whatever. You would want to ideally ask them questions that are directly tied to those goals that they may have for using your application. And then you don't want to just take them and say thank you. You want to use that information to then ideally tailor the experience you're about to give them in the application. If you do that, it shows a very personal touch, right, to the app that they're about to engage with. And it gives them an experience that is essentially unique compared to somebody else who might be using the same application, because they necessarily have answered those questions a little bit differently, and therefore what you're going to present them is going to be a little bit different as well. So if you do that kind of thing, you can, again, depending on the genre and kind of what you're trying to achieve, you can end up with higher sort of overall loyalty to the application by the end of the onboarding than if you just took them through 3 or 4 super generic screens that are maybe super marketing fluff that's just trying to vaguely convince them to say yes on the paywall when they hit it, right? You can do that, but if you tailor it, right, it's going to increase their loyalty. It's going to make them think, oh, I'm starting to become invested in this because I'm answering these questions and it's taking my input and it seems to be customizing the experience to me. So they psychologically they start to already think, okay, it's the same kind of idea of letting people go into a store and try out something, hold it in their hands and try it. Once a human holds the thing, it kind of starts to feel like it's theirs psychologically, and then they're less likely to let go of it because they think, oh, I'm playing with it. This is already mine. This is already something that I'm engaging with. I want to continue to engage with it. So same thing digitally with apps. If you have an experience that creates a tailored and custom experience, it can give them a sense of ownership over what they're doing and will make them more likely to want to stick around. So things like surveys are great for that. And then once you get beyond that, tool tips embedded in the UI, showing at opportune times. I'm an indie developer and I'm launching an application update today to my weather app. And I integrated TipKit, which is a system that Apple brought out fairly recently in the last couple of years to allow you to show tips right in the UI as the user is using it. So I've added several different things that are maybe not perfectly obvious at first glance to users. They're a little bit of a power feature. So I'm using those tips in order to showcase that information to them right then when they are ready to use that, rather than perhaps in a 14-page long onboarding screen that they're either going to skip or only half pay attention to and not remember. And then they get in the app and go, wait, how do I do that? Because it's just not happening at the time that they want to utilize that feature. So as you're building your onboarding and your kind of first run experience, think of those things and try to think about, put yourself in their shoes as a new user, a naive new user to your experience. What is going to make the most sense at the right time? And then lastly, with kind of getting them to try and sort of come back, right? Let's say they've closed the app and gone away, right? To get them to open the app a second time, you can employ email campaigns in order to follow up with them, right? You don't want it to be too corporate, too impersonal. It needs to be something that appeals to them in some way, right? So perhaps even using the data that you've garnered from the survey and the onboarding, some facet of that, to send them a follow-up email. Let's say you can be totally fine if it's automated, but an email that takes data from the survey that they filled out to tell them, hey, you said that you wanted to, work out 3 times a week, right? Like, why don't you check in for your first workout? Something like that as an email follow-up. It's not in the app, it is in their email, and it will kind of remind them that they installed the app and maybe make them come back and open it the second time. And once you get them back in the application, again, you're kind of back on home turf, and you have that ability to then create a great experience that will make them want to come back again and again. So then lastly, down here at the bottom, we have just an example of a funnel management graph. I would highly encourage you to use something like this. This is actually from the Adapty dashboard, but whatever tool you may be using for managing your user experience and kind of the data that you're collecting, I would encourage you to use funnels. They can be very handy. This one is showing you from install is the first step through paywall displayed, trial start, paid, and then a couple of renewals. And of course, this funnel is going to get narrower as it gets down to the bottom. You're not going to have 100% through the whole thing, but you want to understand where people are dropping off in particular. This kind of display, this kind of graph is really great for you to specifically look for anomalies. So let's just say, as an example, from paywall display to trial, the drop off seems maybe higher than it should be, right? Like, you're not going to get a perfect transition from one to the other, but perhaps the drop off is extreme. It's like really bad, right? Most people who see the paywall are not clicking on the trial, right? Maybe you get like a couple percent. That's lower than it should be. So in that case, that's a signal to you as the app owner that there's probably something wrong with your paywall, right? There's something about the paywall that is not convincing people to convert. It's poorly worded. It's not obvious. Like what to do next. Maybe the fact that it's a free trial isn't clear to people, so they think you have to pay. A whole myriad of reasons, but there's something probably wrong with your paywall. And this is a flag to you, a red flag to say, oh, something is wrong here. I need to go check that out and see what that might be. You can dig into it, you can make changes, redeploy, and then collect some more data and see if this conversion number changes. If it improves, now you've actually improved your funnel. You made it so that people get further along than they otherwise would. So let's talk about paywalls a little bit, and we're going to dig into a couple different aspects of paywalls. So the first one is pricing and duration, which is a very, very common set of questions that you're going to ask yourself and other people when you're setting up a paywall and you're setting up the products that you're going to try and sell in your application. And we're going to focus on subscriptions here. So these are renewing products. Typically, monthly and annual pricing are going to be the most common durations, and that is for the main reason being that we're trying to follow inertia here. So if you think about in your own life how your bills work, right? Typically you are billed either on a monthly or annual basis for most things. You might have other billing durations for some stuff, but in general, those are the most common. And so things like weekly or quarterly, or there's a bunch of different, both on Google and Apple, there's different lengths you can pick from. And there are kind of the obvious ones, and then there's some non-obvious ones. And so you can certainly pick those if they work. But what I would suggest to you is that pick them if there's a very specific reason why that is a good idea, right? Why it's going to work for you with your business use case, with the use case for the customer on their side. Pick it for a reason. Don't just pick it because other people are picking it. Pick it because it makes sense for your business and for your application. And in general, if you need kind of something to default to, monthly and annual, right? You can typically hardly go wrong with those choices. They're very, very common, and they, again, are things that are typical for what a user would imagine a bill to be like, right? Monthly or yearly. Weekly subs, typically the retention on those is less than 4 weeks, so less than a 1 month cycle. And so it's maybe not even a good idea to think about them as a true auto renewing subscription product. Think of them almost more like transactional revenue, right? Like a one and done or a two and done kind of deal, where they're going to subscribe and they're going to churn very quickly. Generally speaking, by the end of the year, if you were to have someone sign up for, if you only offered weekly as your option and you then collect data for a year, you're going to end up with a couple percent of the people who subscribed at the beginning of that period, the beginning of the year, still subscribed at the end of the year with a weekly sub, like literally 3-4%. So almost the entire user base that you've garnered over that year is going to have churned. And then you have to start over in year 2 to garner that 96% back to just to get back to where you were, let alone experiencing growth. So weekly can be a very useful tool for you, but it needs to be deployed strategically and in places where it makes sense. As far as what to pick for a price, you got to start somewhere. So using competitor pricing as a baseline can be a great place to start. If you don't have other data to pull from to decide on what makes sense for you for a price, or you just want to add in some, addition to your own data, you want to add in sort of some market data, looking at general competitors and seeing what they're charging and kind of mixing that into your decision making about pricing is totally fine. But what I would recommend is that you not over-index on that. So don't be obsessed with your competitors' pricing, and then also do not sort of obsessively look at it over a long period of time. And as they make changes, you make changes. Like it's not that critical that you are exactly in line with all of your competitors as far as pricing. And that's generally speaking because mobile users don't price shop. If you think about how you use mobile applications in your own life, or your friends or family, and then you think about the ways that, let's say you wanted to engage in price shopping, what you'd have to do in order to make that possible, you're going to have to go in the App Store, search for a thing, find several results, go into each individual one and go through the pricing and figure out what the pricing is, and probably like write it down, back up, go to another application, look at its pricing, and do that 4, 5, 6, 10 times, and then decide on the price and therefore the app you want to choose in order to move forward. People aren't doing that. I can guarantee you that at scale, people are not doing that. So the good news there is that the price sensitivity from that perspective is not super strong as far as competitive pricing. So as long as you're not like wildly out of the ballpark of what other people are charging, if most charge 10 and you're charging $300, unless you have some kind of an amazingly compelling use case that they do not, probably you're not going to do super well. But as long as you're within the ballpark, it's not going to be super important for you to be exactly on the dollar with everybody else. So use it as baseline to start if that helps you. But then really what you want to do is you want to iterate with your own audience as you go, as you move along, to then refine your pricing and figure out what works best for your app, your business, your use case, your customers. So now paywall, some pro tips, the design itself. My recommendation would be to present the most compelling reasons for upgrading immediately. No messing around, no 6 pages of whatever. Tell your users what it is they're going to get for the money they're going to give you and why it matters to them. So something that's a very common issue with particularly maybe developer-led, and I'm speaking for myself as a developer-led development efforts of this kind of thing, is that generally speaking, we want to display features. I want to show you all the hard work that I did, right? I took all this time to build and consider carefully the UX of these features, and I want to present them to you as the value of the application, because that's the value that I think, that's where I think the value is, because that's the work that I did. And that may very well work for you if you're building like a scientific application or something where other sort of, people who are nerds about the things that you're a nerd about as far as your subject matter, maybe that'll work great, right? But not necessarily. So think about that and consider it. I'm not saying don't use features as a selling point, but just consider who your audience is and what they are likely to respond to. And in most general cases, if we're talking about consumer apps, most people want to know, what am I going to get? What do I get out of this, right? If I'm going to give you $10, whatever it is, what am I going to get in return over the period of time that I'm subscribing? And why? And then why does that matter to me as an individual user and in my life? You can't perfectly know what those reasons are going to be, of course, but you can make educated guesses, and then over time you can refine and iterate to learn more from your customers about what they truly value, and then you can refine the paywall itself and show that value directly, and then you can get an improvement in your conversion. So it is an iterative process, but remember to sort of take yourselves out of the shoes of business owner, developer, marketer, growth person, whatever you might be, and put yourselves in the shoes of a prospective customer and what matters to them, right? Because that's ultimately what matters. This is not a vanity project, right? This is not something that's where you're trying to show off what you've done, right? This is, you're trying to appeal to someone and get them to pay you money, right? So you want to think about what is important to them. As far as pricing, multiple prices can work very well in many cases. Monthly and annual tend to be the most common there. It gives users a choice, which often is very valuable to them. And you can also benefit from some price bracketing. So things like, maybe your monthly and your annual are set up in a way where the annual looks pretty enticing because it's a reasonably strong discount over the monthly price. It can actually then, by showing both, it can induce that user into perhaps choosing the annual. You get more revenue immediately than if they had done monthly, and they also for a longer period. So that can be beneficial. Again, it depends on the app and the genre, all those things. But very generally speaking, multiple prices with the price bracketing can be helpful to you. If you do that, if you offer, for example, a discount on your annual, that's some discount of the monthly value, call that out. Call it out directly. Do the math for the user. Don't make them figure out how much percentage that is. Do it and show it to them right on the screen. It's 30% off or whatever. Make it really, really easy for them to see that the annual price in this example is a 2-3 month free or sort of discount off of the monthly price if they chose that instead. So don't make it difficult for them. Just do all the work for them and call it out. Free trial explanations can be very useful. So if you see in these two examples, the one on the left is showing a free trial explanation. This got popularized, I think, in 2023, maybe, by a couple different app developers, and it's been I've seen it sort of in the industry, and Adapty has seen it as well. Kind of us as a collecting data on what our users are doing, our customers are doing. We've seen that this can work very well. Essentially, it's explaining to the user what happens when the trial begins, and then what's going to happen after that. So a lot of people know how free trials work on apps, but a lot of people don't. So that can be a very valuable way to kind of convince them that the free trial is worth trying. And then we've got some more paywall tips. So, and we are at 31 minutes. So I'm gonna speed this up and
we'll you're fine
here. Okay, cool. So as far as additional tips, testing is extremely important. In general, once a month is about a good cadence. It's an easy cadence to think of and to remember. So once a month is great. And what I mean by that is trying different designs. So change your copy, change your layout, change your colors, change your font, change your button design, change the value prop that you're showing, right? If you've got a couple and you're like, I don't know which one will work better. Try them all, right? Put one of them first and then try the other one where the other one is first. Try the free trial explanation. If you've got a free trial and you think that works, try it without. Some customers even do a thing where they will give the user a switch to turn the free trial on and off. So let's say you've got an annual subscription that offers a free trial and a monthly that doesn't. You can have a switch on the screen that says, use free trial. And if it's enabled, then the annual subscription will work with the free trial, where they'll get, 7 days free or whatever before it actually converts to a paid sub. Let them turn it off, and then they just pay the annual fee immediately right up front. Surprisingly, you'd think, why would anyone do that? Why would you do that rather than using the free trial? Probably, generally speaking, it is the case that most people are going to want to try the trial, but some people don't want to deal with trials. They find them annoying and they don't like the emails they get and whatever. They're just like, I know what I want. This is good. I want to buy this. I'm just going to buy it now. So having a switch, let them turn that off, can be an additional sort of customization that you're giving more power to the user. over the options that are available to them for paying, and some of them will take advantage of it. And then you can skip the trial. Instead of converting from non-paying user to trial user, which is still non-paying, they go directly to a paying subscriber immediately. So again, testing super important. You want to test a bunch, make some assumptions, put out an initial set of designs, and see how they go, and then do a bunch of testing, try a bunch of different things, experiment, figure out what might work better than what you've decided in the beginning. You also want to consider the cultural ramifications of presenting to different audiences. I'm actually going to be co-hosting a webinar later today with some partners that Adapty has in Japan, where we're going to go over specifically the differences culturally of paywall design and pricing and everything like that with the Japanese market versus, let's say, the United States market. And there are some very significant differences. I got sort of a preview of the presentation last night, and even just kind of running through it really quick as a dry run before we've done it for real, I already learned several things about how that market treats paywall design and conversion and becoming a customer, the user journey of becoming a customer, very differently than they do in the US. And so you want to think about that kind of thing. If you have an international audience, don't just assume that everyone is going to consume, understand, and potentially convert the same way.
Ben, where can viewers find the link to that presentation later today?
I will, as we're doing the Q&A in a few minutes, I will pull up the link and I'll put it in the chat so we can share.
That's great.
Awesome. Cool. So the other thing would be to show your paywall during onboarding. As a developer, again, I'm trying to sort of reset my own sort of biases and priors that I bring into the process as a developer. I don't really like being shown a paywall during onboarding because I'm like, I haven't even used the app yet. Why are you asking me to pay for something I'd never used before? But that is not how most people think. In most cases, we've found that like the vast majority, 80% or so of people who are going to engage with your application for the first time, let's say on day one, in first interactions, right? The first 1 or 2 times they open the application on the very first day, they're going to decide in that period whether or not they want to pay for this application. So if you don't present the paywall pretty much immediately, you are just losing out on the potential for all of those conversions, at least to a trial, maybe even to a full paid subscription, because they're not going to go looking, they're not going to go find and looking for your paywall if you've hidden it somewhere, right? If you stuck it away in settings to be not annoying, perhaps, they're not going to go find it. They're just going to not pay you, and they're just going to either have a crippled free experience, or they're gonna be like, well, it doesn't do everything I want, so I'm gonna churn out. They don't even know that they could pay and get more functionality, right? They're not gonna be that inquisitive, and you're gonna miss out. So not showing a paywall, even if it kind of feels weird to you, perhaps based on your own what you would want as a customer, is you shouldn't necessarily think that way, because that is not how sort of the public at large thinks. And so show your paywall during onboarding, or very early, right? At the very beginning of your experience, the user experience of your application. You want to give them the opportunity to see your argument, right, for paying, and decide whether to pay or not. And then last 2 things, you want to use A/B tests if you can to understand what paywall designs are working better than others, using data-driven decisions rather than just guessing. Using your gut can be very valuable, but you also want to sort of temper that with data-driven decisions. So if you have a way to A/B test, Adapty has a way to do it. You can post 2 different paywalls. It gets deployed to some subset of your audience, each one, and after a period of time, you can then collect that data and see which one's performing better. And then once you decide, you can pick that one, and then now you're just making more money with the paywall that you've deployed kind of across the board. You've done it in a way that you can be sure is generally better, right? It's not just what you think, it's actually based on data. And the last thing is hard paywalls as an idea. You may think that showing a paywall during onboarding is what's called a dark pattern, meaning like it's anti-consumer. And, I'm sure there's an argument to maybe that it could be, but it's just not how psychology works. People decide early on, so it's a good idea as a business owner to show it. Conversely, hard paywalls, which is one that you cannot get rid of, you cannot go away from, or you can't dismiss until you potentially pay, is much more of a dark pattern. It's much more of an anti-consumer thing. If it's truly the case, there's nothing the user can do in your application if they don't pay. There's just literally no functionality at all. Perhaps a hard paywall is really the only choice, because the alternative would be you don't have a hard paywall, they go in the app, they can't do anything, and they go, well, this sucks. This app doesn't do anything. And they go leave you 1-star review, right? Like in that scenario, a hard paywall probably makes sense because there's literally nothing they can do. But if that's not true, and there is at least some functionality that's possible to provide them for free, then having a hard paywall is just it's anti-consumer. It's not recommended. I would personally not recommend that you do hard paywalls unless you have a very specific reason to do so. So just to give you an example of the A/B test that I talked about, this is a picture from Adapty. This is a screenshot from our dashboard, and you can run an A/B test, and then you can collect data, and you can definitively understand which one's making more revenue, which one's working better, and then decide. And with one click, you can say, I want to deploy option A to my entire audience once the paywall test is complete, and then you've made a good call about which one is better. With the one sort of call out here that I would say, do be a little bit careful when you're running A/B tests, no matter how you're doing it, is to kind of check your assumptions a bit. If we just look at this example really quick, this is from one of our example applications. The one is weekly plus annual trial, or those are the two kind of paid options on the screen. The other one is monthly plus annual. So one is just a straight monthly versus annual, no free trial paywall choice. The other one is weekly rather than monthly plus annual, but the annual has a free trial on it. And you can see that the revenue is better, the conversion's better, right? Like A is very likely the better choice. I will say, very generally speaking, just kind of be aware that depending on what you're testing, you are what you measure, right? So you're going to get an outcome that is based on what inputs you put in. So since one has a trial, what doesn't, I don't know the specifics. This is just an example. I don't know the specifics of this actual test, but broadly speaking, if you have one that has a free trial, one that doesn't, that could make people convert to free trial more. They're more likely to do that, and then they're also maybe a little bit like, I don't want to bother with trying to cancel that. I'm just going to let it convert into a paid, right? Versus not, well, now the pressure is a little higher. There's no free trial option. I have to pick one of these paid options. I'm less likely to pick either one. The weekly is in there. That's different, right? So in this example, I put it in here on purpose because there's actually a couple different variables here that are arguably being tested. And you want to just be careful about not over relying on the raw data from an A/B test. Make sure that you've considered it carefully, and that particularly when you set up your A/B test, that you know what you're testing, right? If you have two designs and you're trying to figure out which one's better, what about them is better, right? Which specific thing are you checking for? The presence of a free trial versus not, weekly versus monthly, like whatever it is that you're trying to test, the marketing copy itself, right? What you're displaying above the pricing. Figure out what you want to test, set up a test that tests those things, and then the outcome that you'll get will be much likely more reliable and better. It'll be the right one because it's the one that you wanted it to be. So user retention. Now that you've got them, they've installed, they've probably signed up for a trial, or maybe they've even paid you. How do you keep them, right? How do you keep them around so that they will pay you again, right? That they'll let the renewal happen versus canceling it. And they'll continue to come back in the app. They'll engage, they'll use it, they'll get value from the application, just like you're getting value from them monetarily. You want to maintain a high quality UX over time. It's critical, right? Like you don't have to obsess about it, but if you think about it in your own life, apps that have a terrible interface and a terrible experience, you're just less likely to use them, for one. And then also, if you're paying attention to your bills and you see one coming up for renewal, you're like, no, that app's I don't really like that app. It doesn't work very well. I'm going to go ahead and just cancel it. I'm not going to let it renew, right? So maintaining a reasonably high quality UX over time is key to user loyalty, right? In order for them to come back and continue using the application, you need them to have a good experience, and that's the first part of it. Asking for feedback is really valuable, and you might be surprised how easy it is. What I'd recommend is, if you have a customer support apparatus, some way for them to email you or call you or whatever it is to get help. If you can complete and satisfactorily complete a support request, right? You fixed a bug that's in there, or you fixed some kind of problem with their account or whatever. That is actually right then and there in the we fixed your problem, thank you for using our system response email or contact, is a great opportunity for you to ask the user if they'd be willing to maybe jump on a 5-minute Zoom call with you to have them explain to you what they do and do not like about the app, right? Just straight up, I just would love to hear your thoughts about what you're using it for and how you like it and what you don't like. And I'd love just to hear your thoughts, right? And quick 5-minute Zoom call, no big deal. You'd be surprised by how many people would actually respond to that and say, sure, I'll jump on a 5-minute Zoom call and tell you my thoughts about your app. You're not really asking for very much. You're just asking for their opinion. And it can go quite a long way. And that data is gold because it's a user that is currently paying you, right? Is also hopefully happy because you just helped solve their support problem, and they're ready and willing to work with you. So ask for feedback. Also, show an exit survey, or perhaps email it to them if they unsubscribe. You want to understand why did they leave, right? If you don't know, if you have people churning and you have no idea why they're churning, you can't solve the problem. You can't fix it. So ask them. Again, they are usually very willing to tell you what they didn't like about the application, and you can take that data. You probably won't be able to get them back necessarily, but you can learn from that information and you can make it better for others. So related to that, win back offers, it can be useful, but try to make sure you insert them at the right time. Don't, like, for example, don't just, if they're venting to you about what they don't like about your application, don't throw a, well, we'll give you 50% off on a renewal for, an annual subscription. That can work in some cases, but in generally speaking, it's not the right time, right? You want to use those kinds of things in places where you've primed them to hopefully reconsider, right? Not just sort of as a broad approach. And then lastly, a human touch goes a very long way, right? So like I said, you email them, you ask them for a 5-minute Zoom call, you actually get on the Zoom call, you talk to them, you're nice, you're friendly, you accept their feedback, you thank them for being a user, right? Like, you just show that you're a real person or a real group of people who are working hard to make an application. You're not some faceless corporation. Can go a really long way to engendering loyalty and, and having your users consider the human side on the other side, right? Like, hopefully you're considering them as a user base, as a collection of humans. They don't really think of us in the other way, that way either. So building that connection can really make a difference. And then, just kind of as an overarching theme for the presentation, experimentation is really, really valuable. As a developer, I often think, I've worked really hard, I've hit the button to submit the app to the App Store, I'm done, right? My work is over. I've worked very, very hard to make this as good as I can. That's it, right? And maybe I've got a new version coming, but like, as far as continual improvement, I'm done. It's a very common developer mentality. Don't think that way, right? There's always room for improvement, and the way that you can make that improvement happen is through experimentation. So the more you experiment with your paywalls, with your onboarding, with your icon, with your ASO in the App Store, of keywords and what you title the application, and just all of those things are ripe for experimentation, and they can all literally lead to an end goal where you are not just building a better experience and a better application for your customers, but you're also literally making more money. It's also more financially successful for you. So experimentation is a good thing. That's it.
Ben, thank you so much for all of that. That was extremely valuable. And I'm not going to lie, man, I could probably listen to you talk for the rest of the day about this stuff. This is excellent. We have several questions in the chat. Before we dive into that, I just put a few resources in the chat. If you're looking for 70% off your first 2 months with Adapty, you can find that there. Custom growth strategy with RoundSquared for performance marketing and creative. If you want to join our next App Talks Roundtable session, that networking call will be Tuesday, April 8th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then last but not least, if you'd like to join our community platform, that link is in the chat as well. Perfect. So we got several questions here, and I actually have a couple as well. We'll go with Brian first. He had asked about recommended email automation platform you usually use for startups, particularly to use for user onboarding.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's changed quite a bit in the last 5-10 years. MailChimp is certainly a good option. I'm trying to think of that other one that
we use Ingrow.ai a lot.
Okay, there you go.
You can segment all of your user bases based on their actions in the app, and they have a lot of great features. I'll drop that in the comment.
That's fair. I will tell you that I'm sure since the advent of all the AI explosion, I'm sure there's a million more of those systems that use AI to help you out. So it's a good recommendation.
Well, Brian was while we're on Brian, he had another question as well. We'll dive into the others. So he's currently working on a fitness app. One thing he's trying to optimize for people who are actually doing their first workout, which is a big ask since most people during onboarding are usually sitting on their couch clicking through their phone. Any experience or ideas on how we can get people to do their first workout so they can actually experience the value of the app?
Sure. So that depends obviously on the features that you're engaging with. You could, as far as like what happens during a workout in your application, but maybe you could show a video of someone doing that, or you could even run them through like a mock workout session. So realizing that they're not probably actually on a workout machine or about to go for a run, you could take them through like a virtual version of that where you essentially just fake the data, right? Fake the distance, fake the reps, the time, whatever it is that they're doing, and show that to them in an interactive way, ideally as similar to how the real UI actually works. I mean, ideally you just sort of mock the data and have the UI itself run itself, but you could take them through a sort of a mock experience, and that could show them really, rather than telling them, you're actually literally showing them the value that you're going to give them during, and it might induce them to go out for a run.
Perfect. Hope that answered your question. Brian, let's go down to Matthew. Matthew asked, what is the best way to notify users of a new feature? Tactics, email, in-app message, etc.
Sure. So emails, if you have their email address, that's a great one. Depending on your use case, you may not collect their email address. So if that's not available to you, then the other kind of easy option would be in-app notifications. Those can, of course, be tailored, right? And now with the advent of both on Google and Apple of AI integration into the platform, there can be summarization, there can be coalescing of multiple notifications into one by the system that you don't have any control over. So I think that's been probably a very reliable way to do it in the past, and it somewhat remains to be seen how effective that's going to be going forward with the OS level addition of all these like AI tools to quote unquote help the user with their bevy notifications. So I'm predicting that may be a little bit less effective in the future. But emails is a great one because you're not beholden to all of that, right? All the sort of stuff that's in the OS itself. It's just an email. So as long as they're checking their email, they'll see that. That can be great. And then also, even if they're in the app but they're not aware, things like a pop-up with stuff, or even like a little quick video or something of some of the new features, can be great too, because again, they're not probably going to go into settings, what's new, and find that list that you've buried in there forever. It's good to have that, and some people will find it, but people aren't not going to go looking. So showing it to them right when they launch can be good too.
Amazing. All right, let's go down to Kate. This is all so good. Thank you, Kate. I am new to the idea of Adapty. I use Apple subscription processes for my app. Can you clarify that with integrating Adapty onto my app as my subscription management, I can control the paywall setup and the graphics setup here on the app through Adapty and not have my developers redo or redesign the paywall graphics?
That is a great question. So exactly the way that you've described it is how it works. You have the ability to design and build your paywalls natively in your application with code if you like, and still use Adapty. That's definitely an option. But you can also integrate the SDK and then use what we call Paywall Builder, which is essentially the web-based paywall design tool that we have. And when you do that, you have full control over the paywall. We have a ton of templates that you can pick from to start from. But once you pick one, you can then change the font and the color and the background, and then you can show images, you can show video, you can decide what kind of buttons you want. You have full control over the whole screen, and it's a point-and-click interface, so that democratizes the responsibility of paywall design and deployment beyond just your devs. Anybody in your company can do it because you can just sign in and click around. And then when you go to deploy it, it's basically instant. So you hit the button to deploy. As long as the SDK has already been installed and is live in your application, in production, then when you hit deploy, it becomes available to your users essentially immediately. And that's true for an individual paywall design. It's true for an A/B test. Anything that you're doing around Paywall Builder, the deployment's going to be instant. So no update of the app is required. The turnaround on that is, again, it can be minutes instead of probably a couple days.
Kate also asked about TipKit. That sounded like a really valuable tool. I just put the documentation in the chat as well for everyone watching. But she had asked about if you could describe to her how you have used it and how it presents.
Sure. Yeah. So TipKit's awesome. It's a native framework built right into the iOS SDK. So like in my case, what I do is I show my app is a weather app. And so there's a couple different displays within the app that are you get sort of some basic data, but like, for example, there's UV index and it's just like the current UV index. If you tap on that button, it brings up a graph that shows you the UV index for the entire day. But it's not super obvious that button is a button, and you may miss it. So what I do is I show a tip that tells you that that's possible. And it's really cool. It actually like pulls the UI apart, the UI that I designed, and it inserts this UI that is the tip that can then be dismissed by the user. So it's truly embedded in your UI, which is, I think, really cool. You also have full control over how and when it displays. So you can say, I want to show it the very first time the user is shown that screen. I want to show it after the third time they're shown that screen. I want to show it after they press a particular button or go through a particular sort of set of UI elements. You can tell it that you want it to like repeat or not. Like there's a bunch of different options, and it does also automatically remember whether it's generally speaking been shown and if it's been dismissed. If that's the case, it won't show it again. So the framework is kind of built for you to easily drop in and use, and you can set it up to be triggered in a whole variety of ways, and it's free. It's just built into the SDK.
Perfect. Kate was also asking about if you could explain the pricing of the Pro plan for Adapty and how that works.
Sure. So I don't specifically have any particular let's just say involvement in the pricing for that. The sales team is going to be a much better group of people to talk to about that. But I'd be happy to connect you with one of them if you'd like to talk more about it.
Perfect. All right, LaDonna, how's it going, LaDonna? She was asking about phone numbers. So she collects phone numbers. Is it weird to use text marketing for feedback?
I don't think it is, as long as you're doing it in a way that is, I'm just going to say, friendly. Like, again, if you think about yourself, right, and how you engage with the world and how the world engages with you, oftentimes when I get a text from someone that I don't know, I'm immediately suspicious, right? And then I'm thinking, is this spam or some kind of a phishing attack or something? And then even if it's not, if it's clear that it's not, it's like, okay, who is this and what is it for? So my suggestion would just be make sure that you're very clear, and all you have are words, right? That's literally all you have to convey your message, and maybe images. So just be very clear about who you are, where you're from, what you're trying to do, and that you're not asking for anything sketchy, right? Like as long as you're doing it, I think in a very straightforward way, I think it could work.
Amazing, LaDonna. Hope that helps. I had a quick question for you, Ben.
Yes.
I get this one a lot, especially with early stage startup founders that, let's say, are coming straight out of development and have no users yet and want to get to the money making as soon as possible.
Sure.
What would you advise an early stage founder that really wants to monetize on day one, rather than just focus on the user acquisition piece and feedback?
Right. Yeah. So that's, I mean, there kind of are, generally speaking, like two ways you can go about it, right? You can go for users and scale and worry about money later, or you can say, I want the users that I do garner to be high quality and paying. So if that's what you want, if you're not trying to build the next TikTok and you don't want to just get 100 million users really quickly, then my suggestion would be you'd want to very carefully target how you're doing your UA, right? You still have to do UA. It's just a different tactic. You want to target exactly who those people need to be and who are most likely to pay you, right? So not just, instead of this like broad approach where you're just trying to target everyone necessarily, you want to zero in on exactly those people that you think are most likely to pay, and then you want to go into the spaces where they already are and talk to them, right? So if it's a very expensive product, then that maybe is like in person or phone based outreach, right? Where you're talking, it's kind of like guerrilla warfare. You're going after one person at a time. If it's maybe a cheaper product, but it's still very focused, you still want to find those places where people like that congregate, and then target your ad spend or whatever it is in those specific places, and kind of ignore everything else because you're going after that specific audience.
Yeah, 100%. Love it. Brian, he was asking about the Japan talk. That was actually posted.
Yes.
I think Ben already put it in the chat.
Yeah, I put it in the chat. So yeah. It's tonight for people on the East Coast. It's 7 p.m. tonight Eastern time. So feel free to register. And if you
wind down a little more value,
if you register and you can't attend, just register anyway. We'll send you the video after. So if you can't attend in person, just throw your email in there and we'll send you the video.
That reminds me, this recording of this presentation will also be posted in our App Talks platform. So if you're not in the community already, feel free to join to access the live workshop. Perfect. All right. Well, that brings us to the end. Very informative presentation today, Brian. Ben. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure.
Where can everyone find you? Where can everyone keep up with you?
So on social, I'm basically Ferris Guy everywhere, and I'll just put that in the chat so you don't have to spell it. I'm gonna put the @ in front of it, so it's like X, GitHub if you want to look at my repositories. Basically everywhere I'm Ferris Guy, and you can find me. And I'll throw my email for Adapty in here too. So if anybody wants follow up on Adapty stuff, please feel free to email me.
Gotcha. For those joining on LinkedIn, I don't think the comments are carrying over. That's
okay.
bgohlke@adapty.io. I actually have that on screen right now, Ferris Guy. Screen if you want to keep up with Ben. Awesome, Ben. Thanks so much for joining us today, man. We'll be talking to you soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. See you guys.